Boom. Ha, gotcha. Okay. Anyway, about 6 months ago, I was on YouTube and I came across a video in my recommended. It was called Building the Perfect Squirrel-Proof Bird Feeder by Mark Rober. I watched this video and fell in love with squirrels. This video will be linked in my source sheet at the end of the video. But then I saw this clip from the video.
I didn't anticipate the wide variety of animals that use fences as interyard highways to get around as a substitute for all the trees that existed before we got here.
I began to think how much animals have changed throughout the centuries due to urbanization, and then I combined these two concepts and this video was born. Before we get into the urbanization portion, let's do some background on the Eastern Gray Squirrel. The Eastern Gray Squirrel's scientific name is Sciurus carolinensis. Their taxonomy goes like this. They are part of the Eukarya domain, Animalia kingdom, Chordata phylum, Mammalia class, Rodentia order, Sciuridae family, Sciurus genus, carolinensis specific epithet. They mainly eat nuts and berries, but have been known to sometimes eat bugs and frogs. On average, they weigh about 1 pound. The Eastern Gray Squirrel is native to the USA and has been brought to portions of Europe. And that's mainly all the background information you will need to know about the Eastern Gray Squirrel. Etienne Benson is an associate professor in the Department of History and Sociology at University of Pennsylvania. He wrote a paper titled The Urbanization of the Eastern Gray Squirrel. Unfortunately, I was unable to gain access to this paper without being part of a university, which was a bummer because this paper seemed like a very good source. I was, however, able to find an interview with Dr. Benson about his article. I will mention this podcast quite a lot, and I will link this podcast on the source sheet. Squirrels started moving into cities around the Industrial Revolution. This is because labor animals such as cows and horses were no longer necessary in the city. This is when squirrels became morally significant members of the community. One thing Mark Rober mentions in his video is this.
And sadly, all good things must come to an end, and because I didn't want them to develop an unhealthy dependence on my handouts, after about a week of free reign, I took down the course. But
I did some research, and it turns out people used to just feed wild animals, especially squirrels. This is not as common anymore. In fact, there has been a movement for a while now to prevent this. People think it is not okay to feed wild animals anymore because it makes the animals dependent on you for a food source. I was at the dentist recently and I was telling the hygienist about the subject of this video I was making. She told me a story about how when she was a little girl, there was this one squirrel that would always come to her back door. Every time it would come to the door, she would feed it a cracker. Eventually, the squirrel learned to scratch at the door to get a cracker. When they moved away from this house, they actually had to leave a note for the new homeowners that there is a squirrel that will scratch for a cracker. This type of thing would happen in parks and cities all the time. They eventually realized that the squirrels were dependent on the food. You can see this same type of thing happening with other wildlife. In Rocky Mountain National Park, they fine you if you do not lock up your food correctly. This is because if the bears get into your food, they can become dependent on the food source and become aggressive. If this happens, the park has to kill the bear. According to The Guardian, there used to be over 3.5 million red squirrels in the United Kingdom in the 1870s, and now there are only 250,000. Now why are we all of a sudden talking about red squirrels? Well, this is the interesting part. When the United Kingdom colonized the United States, settlers from the United Kingdom brought the Eastern Gray Squirrel all the way back to the United Kingdom. It turns out the Eastern Gray Squirrel carries a pox disease that kills the red squirrel. Also, the Eastern Gray Squirrel is an invasive species in the United Kingdom, and this is yet another reason why I do not support colonization. It has an effect not just on people, but on wildlife too. Dr. Benson references a 1914 article in a Boy Scout publication titled The Missionary Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton, one of the co-founders of the Boy Scouts. The purpose of this article was to introduce more squirrels to cities. It also encouraged the boys to treat the squirrels kindly. This way, the boys would learn to be generous. This is an effect that squirrels have had on people to make them nicer and all-around better people. Now, I said at the beginning that I loved the Mark Rober video. Unfortunately, there were some clips I couldn't really figure out how to work into the video, but here they are anyway because they're just so cool.
And whether they could climb a certain pole material was a moot point anyways because of this. Look at this! These guys are basically freaking rodent-sized Simone Biles. And this was the exact moment I realized I just might be outmatched here. The few mammals that can survive a fall from any height because they make their terminal velocity so low. Here's the second launch. And this may look like pure luck in real time, but the slow-mo tells a different story. In that amount of time, he's already made a slight lateral push in that direction and locked his landing target with his head. Now on to our third to last obstacle, the tourist trap. And this one was just a freaking delight. A little peanut butter really did the trick here.
And I think this last one really sums up why squirrels are such incredible animals.
But of all the animals, I can definitively say now that squirrels are my absolute favorite, and they're certainly a more formidable adversary than porch pirates. They're kind of adorable, incredibly crafty, curious by nature, athletic, and persistent.
Thanks for watching. Wait! What about the source sheet? Here are all of my sources. Now it's really thanks for watching.